Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Khalil Doheny. I'm head of content at Digital Niche Agency. Today, I have Charles from AtomBeam with a special guest, Brian. Guys, how are you guys doing today?
Good. Great,
Very
Khalil.
good, thank you.
Awesome. Charles, while people are tuning in, do you want to give a quick background of Brian and what we can expect for today's webinar?
Sure. Yeah. So the plan is for today is for first, before Brian gets introduced, I can introduce him now, but before we really get rolling on the questions that he's going to handle, which is really about patents, we're going to talk just briefly about sort of like the company, where we are, just a little bit on sort of, what we've been doing in the last month or so that's, changed, any kind of thoughts we have on strategies, things like that, just a general update. But that should be fairly quick. And then I'll hand it over to Brian, who is a patent god. And as I think everybody will see here, when they hear him talk, he not only understands them, he can explain them, which is really, unusual combination in my understanding of history. So at any rate, Brian, do you want to talk briefly about your background, and then we'll dive into the overall, please?
Well, sure. Briefly, I mean, I'm a patent agent, not a patent attorney, more or less the same thing, but I'm not an attorney. And this is my third career. I was a nuclear engineer in the Navy for a while, but more relevantly, I was in the software world. I came up in a company called Genesis, which I ultimately became chief technology officer of, about a $500 million software company. Then I was also CTO at Nuance. So I had a middle career as a software guy and came up with some patents. I have 48 patents where I'm an inventor. And along the way, I got interested in patent law. And so this is my third career. I've been doing it now for 13 years. I've got a nice team, and we get patents for clients like AtomBeam, growing tech companies with really cool technologies.
Yep. Thanks, Brian. So it's actually really cool to work with Brian. I mean, the focus here with Brian is he really understands what we're doing at a granular level, and that's super valuable when it really comes down to actually writing the patent and understanding what's the innovation, because it's a fair number of patent attorneys, agents have some sort of background here, but at the end of the day, they all have some degree of expertise. If you have really deep expertise, that is super helpful. Anyway, so getting rolling here, I think we're good to go, Khalil?
Yeah, we're good to go. We're going to have a nice presentation here. It'll be a beautiful discussion with Brian and Charles. And if anyone in the audience has a question that wants to be answered, please ask it in the Q&A chat box below. We'll either, if it's acceptable throughout the webinar, we'll answer it there, but we will also have some time at the end to answer your questions.
Right. Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to put in your questions as you think of them, and Khalil, if it makes sense, stop us and we'll talk about the stuff. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to share a screen and crank in. As always, I have a little presentation I'd like to give. So quickly on what's hot right now, in sort of thinking of it in two categories, which is commercial and defense. First thing is, I'm going to IoT TechWorks Expo this week. We're going as a guest of Inmarsat, and they even pay our lunches. Okay, everybody should know. But we're also making big time progress with our distributors. They're really hot on this thing and pushing it. I have a meeting with one of their most senior people there. So that thing is pushing along, and I see that as like a really good opportunity for near-term revenue. Next thing is some in-depth discussions. I can mention the names of the ones we're not under NDAs with: AT&T, Google, Samsung, and there's another one that's really big that I can't even say the name. It's not a tech company, believe it or not, it's a big oil company. But we have a lot of focus coming from those guys, but the biggest one by far is this big hardware maker for technology that you would know the name. And we've had, I don't know what it is, 3, 4, 5, I think it's 4 in-depth discussions with a lot of their senior engineers. That's serious engagement on their part. I don't know if it goes anywhere, but I can tell you that they're talking specifically about how I'd put it in this product, and what the advantages are and how that gives them a competitive edge. So anyway, a lot of stuff happening there and on the Department of Defense. So right now we're waiting for decisions on 2 different proposals. Now I'll post them when I know. One is a phase 2, and that's for neural compaction, which is the one I've talked about before that focuses on images. And the other one is a phase 1 that's for the Navy, that's focused on sending data underwater. And that's also focused more or less on neural compaction, that is imaging again, sonar images in this case. We're working like beavers on 2 more that we're submitting for the Navy. And there is a very important admiral who I'm in dialogue with, multiple emails with him. He's engaging his senior people. They want to put it in their most important project for future naval communications, or he does. And, we'll see. Not saying these are done. I'm saying there's a lot of activity. And so just to emphasize here, the Inmarsat stuff is really plowing along. We have 2 that are under NDA that are in very, very active discussions. And again, in the DoD, the Navy and the Air Force are really engaged with us right now. So, you got to ask the question, like, where does this go? And I'll tell you, what the world wants to hear about is we have a solution. It's as close to plug and play as you can get. And if you were to say to yourself, okay, well, what does that look like? Well, it would be able to reduce everything, not just machine data, kind of stuff we focus on now. I'm not saying we're redoing everything, throwing anything out. No, we're focused on the IoT data, but with the Air Force paying for it, and maybe eventually the Navy paying for it, images and video are in the mix now with neural compaction. And what's the other category? Audio. And there is a Navy opportunity with audio, perhaps. And at the end of the day, what you really want is in one little package to be able to say, this will do everything for you. Stick it on your logic port, this chip. And so, I don't know if we're going to call it ultra compaction. It just sounds kind of cool, but it includes like the whole package, right? All 3 of those categories of data. You can do that all in one chip. And I don't know, Brian, if I may be out of school here because you haven't patented this yet. At any rate, I think that this is the bomb. At any rate, like I said, the world wants solutions. They don't want to hear that you got a technology that's cool. They want to know that they have something that really deals with their problem. And so we've talked about compaction, lots. And there is tons of interest in this. For some people, that's all they care about. For others, all they care about is the image stuff. And still others are really going to care about the audio. There are lots, though, that want to handle all those things. And so if you can put all those things on one chip and have it so that Apple, when they're making an iPhone or whomever is making whatever, I am interested in everything. I'm interested just in the images. I'm interested only in, I'm interested both in images and compaction, whatever. That is where this thing goes. And then the immediate question is, well, when are we going to do this? Well, if the government's paying us, we'll do it. For one thing, you know, a lot of the work gets done by subcontractors, so it's not really an institutional distraction for us. Or if we get a big chunk of institutional money in. And so right now, what are we doing? We're out selling what we've got, which is compaction, which is an incredible game-changing deal. And so we're not distracting the focus, just to be clear. There's tons of interest just in compaction, and that's where what we work right now.
Your futures end.
I don't know if you could hear that, but it's cool. It's like, watch your futures end. That's kind of cool. But I just want to talk briefly about why we're ending the StartEngine race. And it's really because we are getting close to the point where we're going to need institutional capital. We need somebody to write us a check for 5 million kind of numbers. And you know, it's pretty hard to raise that in crowdfunding. Not opposed to it, but you know, but unless it comes from a big company that can say, here's money, and we're going to push this and that forward for you. So there is, and we are seriously engaged here. I still get a lot of reach outs from venture. Just had a long call yesterday with one, but you know, my big focus is bringing money from a big player that can bring more to the table than just money. So with all that, I'm going to bring in Brian here, and he's going to tell us about patents. And Brian, just let me know when you want me to flip to another slide, please.
Okay, and mostly I'll be fairly extemporaneous, but one great thing about AtomBeam, so I've been working with them since the beginning. You know, they're one of my several clients, and is that they've built up quite a portfolio relatively quickly. And it's hard to tell with numbers, but the first thing is essentially the first two blocks there, 18 issued patents. That means you can go on the patent office or Google Patents and find them. And 8 that are allowed, meaning an examiner has said you've met the conditions for patentability, and within the next couple of months, they'll become patents as well. So essentially 26 patents at this stage in a tech company's life is quite unusual. And we have a number pending, and we're working on some other ones and so forth. So with a portfolio, patent portfolio of this size, rather inexpensively obtained also, which is important because it's sort of guerrilla inventing and guerrilla marketing, is that it sort of sets this company apart, and which is good because when you're dealing with companies like Inmarsat or Google, you want to be able to get their attention, but you also want to not be swished by them. So you want to have some protection, and also it makes them more interesting from the potential of possibly being acquired or strategic investment. If someone sees that there's a serious commitment in terms of IP, that makes them more interested in strategically investing, whether it's a VC, institutional, or somebody like Inmarsat doing a strategic investment as part of a deal that involves, you know, revenue and work. The other thing interesting about having this many patents this soon is it reflects on the novelty of the technology. So essentially with AtomBeam, we started with some patents applications, which are now almost all of our early ones are now patents. They got through pretty quickly, and in many cases without any rejections, but usually there's minor rejections. The point is, we didn't have to fight against a mountain of prior art, which is things that have been done previously, because in order to get a patent, you have to prove that it's a technology, something that's subject to patent law, that it's new, it's not obvious, and that that you haven't sold it more than a year. There's other small ones, but the main ones are, it's actually the kind of invention that patents are about, technology, that it's new technology, and then it's not obvious in light of some other piece of technology. Obviously, data compression has been around for a long time in various forms. But what AtomBeam has done is come up with a new way of doing data compression that uses artificial intelligence to basically enable a much higher compression ratio for general purpose machine data. Like if you're uploading a new version of the OS, perfect application. And combining that with other technologies in a pre or post stage to give some compression that is ideally set up for things like video, where it's more common to have what's known as lossy compression. There's various ways you can combine to get an optimal mix. So the early patents were on the core technology, and they got through the patent office rather quickly. In addition, we've done a number of patent applications now matured into patents, but some of them are still pending on various use cases, such as having rotating code books or using it to detect intrusion, man-in-the-middle attacks, and using it in basically compaction along with as a means of encryption, as well as reducing the size of things. Doing it now, this one isn't a patent yet, but you know, we're still hopeful. Doing it where you have compaction within a chip, between different cores of a chip, so you basically have more efficient silicon. So it's a technology that applies in very large horizontal plays, such as, you know, Navy or Air Force communications with satellites or with submarines, and also, you know, streaming video over the internet. There's just so many applications, and the fact that AtomBeam has a pretty good patent portfolio already sort of makes people take notice and say, okay, well, obviously there's something new here, or they wouldn't have all these patents. Obviously, if I invest or partner with AtomBeam, and then 6 months later, let's say Meta, you know, some company that isn't as known for its ethics, you know, decides to get in there and fight and take it, you know, whatever. I'm mostly just joking, but you know, Microsoft, Meta, Google, Apple, one of the big players might say, you know, we just want to do that ourselves. We'd rather that they were interested in investing and or acquiring AtomBeam rather than building it themselves. So having a nice portfolio of patents that covers core technologies, as well as extensions of the core technologies, as well as particular use cases that rely on the capabilities of technology, gives you a patent portfolio that has the effect of making people look. It raises the multiple when you're looking at investment. So those of you who are already investors, you know, can expect better outcomes in the future, because companies that have substantial IP are valued more highly by VCs and strategic investors. So that's the sort of, you can go ahead and go on to the next one there, Charles. It is a pretty substantial patent portfolio. This basically I sort of hinted at. People often think of patents as primarily about stopping other people from copying, and that is obviously the most obvious sort of on the nose function of a patent. If I have a patent with a claim that says, I make my mousetrap this way, then you can't make your mousetrap that way, or I can sue you. But really, for growing tech companies, a far more valuable attribute or aspect of a patent portfolio is money. And it really, it's at every stage of the game. So in the unhappy occasion when a company fails, like a little company called Nortel, which sort of collapsed in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, because they got very high flying on wireless technologies, and then it all collapsed. Well, they ended up having a $2 billion transaction selling their patent portfolio, which, you know, so it can be valuable in the after market, but of course we're not interested in that here. We're far more interested in the upfront part, which is it can help interest investors, but it can also raise the valuation of the company substantially. Essentially, you've seen, probably many of you, Shark Tank, and when Kevin says, yeah, how many patents do you have? And they say, huh, patents? They're out, you know, for that reason I'm out. Whereas on the other hand, if someone comes in like AtomBeam and says, look, this is a foundational technology for which we're working on and very far along on getting design wins with key players of scale, and we have a large patent portfolio that we're continuing to develop, then suddenly it becomes a very interesting company to invest in and at a higher multiple. So go ahead to the next one, Charles.
So just to
yeah.
No, one quick point. You just used the word foundational to describe the tech. So could you expand on that a little, especially in view of patenting?
Well, sure. So essentially, you can get a patent on something that takes something that's well known and adds some non-obvious twist, a new feature that people go, wow, I wish I'd thought of that. Generally, if you have that effect of, boy, I wish I'd thought of that from somebody who's actually in that industry, that probably makes it patentable, but it isn't foundational because the core technology was already there. So like an improvement on managing on-chip cache, some sort of tweak that makes it just a little bit better. That could well be patentable, but it's not the same as coming up with the idea of an on-chip cache. So the compaction from AtomBeam is essentially a completely new way to think about compressing data that's very, very strong for a very, very large class of data. For example, data from sensors in an Internet of Things application is perfect data for compaction. So when it comes in, it's at the ground floor, a completely new way of doing something, or of doing something completely new, then that's sort of like a foundational patent. When the iPhone was first introduced, Apple had a number of patents that had to do with this idea of a phone that's also a computer that has a touch screen. Some of them were design patents, many of them were litigated, all against Samsung. But the point is, there were some foundational technologies, or Qualcomm with some of their wireless technologies that they do. They end up being in the position of having in their case, standard setting, which could indeed happen here, by the way. This is an excellent candidate for something that could become a standard. And then these would all be standard essential patents. So you think Qualcomm, virtually every mobile device, except Apple's, some of Apple's, have Qualcomm chips in them. And that's because Qualcomm has been continually investing, but they started with some foundational technologies for mobile telephony. So when you're foundational, you're at the beginning of something and people build on that. But that also means that with a technology like AtomBeam's, people don't want to buy compaction, in an API or go get your compaction SDK, a few weeks of work at home, and you'll have everything really running tickety-boo. It's different when you have a foundational technology for something horizontal, meaning across domains. Charles's examples of people he's talking to make it clear what that means. Navy or the military in general obviously has large data communication needs. Media, wanting to stream media. Zoom could be an investor because make it, use less bandwidth for Zoom calls means more money for more profit for Zoom. So it's applicable in a wide range of technologies, but it needs to be sort of baked in at the down low in the stack. So it's foundational, both in the sense of it's really new, but also that it's going to be down in the foundation of the stack, which makes the challenge a little bit more difficult at the beginning because you have to get these design wins that Charles has been talking about. But it also means that the patents that are of that nature are typically a lot more valuable, because if this design succeeds and gets into the military's communications infrastructure and into Inmarsat's communications infrastructure, if it becomes part of the GPS system, et cetera, then it becomes part of the world around us, just the same way that Qualcomm is. And obviously that has a commensurate positive effect on the little green icon there. It makes the value of AtomBeam and it's for its investors and for its partners greater.
Khalil, do you need to interject or?
Yeah, there are some questions that we can go ahead and answer right now. Aside from patents, what protections does AtomBeam have to prevent theft? Suppose, for example, an enemy of the US wants to steal our technology for their own military use. Can we break their code books, or is it just a matter of time before our Air Forces and Navy's edge is negated?
That's an interesting question. Brian, you probably are better off answering that. I mean, because you're more technical, frankly.
Well, okay, so this is not me as a patent agent answering, but me as a technologist. And pretty clearly there's one country, so that'll give you an idea which country. There's one country of most particular interest because they're very advanced technologically. They're competing with America for, in machine learning, in large scale computing, et cetera. In quantum communications, they're arguably ahead. So let's assume that they were able to reverse engineer AtomBeam's technology. They would basically, if they did that, obviously, if they're doing that in their military, they're not going to pay any attention to patent lawsuits. It's going to be a bigger issue. It would have the effect of making their communications more efficient, but it wouldn't necessarily affect anything on the US communications, unless, as you say, they were actually able to hack the code books. But there are actually elements of this technology that would enable that to be detected. And there's a number of things, such as rotating code books, such as basically distributing code books and having different ones for different uses. You can imagine, like at the military, you have different levels of classification, and for different, or in IT, where you have a zero trust architecture, you have different kinds of levels of authentication, and you're rechecking continually. So if you begin so you can protect the most sensitive information using a number of capabilities, including compaction, but you may have a lot more invested there in protecting against intrusion, whereas routine email communication between sailors on aircraft carriers might not be quite as, but fundamentally, there's always that issue of nations can invest large amounts of resources, and when you're doing that, all things are possible. But I mean, you can hack anything if you can throw $50 billion at it. But of course, there's always the change that happens as a result. So being the systems being used in national defense kind of scenarios, presumably, and certainly it's the intention of the way that some of the patents are, is that there will be ways to detect intrusions and risks being realized and reactions can be taken. So it's sort of like all technologies and communications. There are bad actors in the world. I wouldn't see criminal bad actors as being a primary candidate. I think whoever asked the questions probably nailed it, is that nation states, China as an example, would have the resources and may have the motivation. But I mean, it requires effort on their part, just like hacking anything else. Even quantum communications using entangled photons in a satellite and in two different ground stations, they can be hacked. Just people have to figure out how, and hopefully. So the answer is, there's never a foolproof anything, but this is more foolproof than what goes before it, and it would limit the number of threat actors to a small subset of the total number of people in the world that might want to get into Exxon's communications channels, for instance.
Yep, and one thing that Josh has said to me, our chief scientist, he's been on before, is that A, it would take a nation state to hack into a code book, and B, if they hacked into one successfully, that doesn't give them any information about hacking into another one, because it's basically built from the ground up from a new set of data. So it's a pretty secure technology, and there are national security implications also that some have recognized who are in positions to do something about it, that say, okay, you have these code books and you don't get these other code books. And so unlike encryption, where if you have the key to the encryption, you can see everything in it, you could only see those things that you have the code books for. So you can see this information, but not that, and this, but not this. So anyway, there's a lot of interesting national security implications about it. And as Brian says, nothing is completely invulnerable, but this is recognized as being pretty far advanced, and advanced in comparison with what we have now. Not only that, it doesn't even add, really to add the security is just, you don't add anything. You're just part of the deal. So, Brian, unless there's, well, actually, why don't you keep going, Brian, and then we'll bring in the questions.
Okay, so this slide, I mean, these are Charles's slides, and they sort of give me ideas to talk. Essentially, there are two kinds of patent strategy, and I rarely think of patent strategies as a standalone thing. I think of patents as sort of like ships, or having a patent portfolio is like a nation having a fleet. Obviously, only if you're a seagoing nation, but it's sort of like saying you'll have a patent portfolio if you're a tech company. If you're a seagoing nation, you're going to have a fleet. And that sends an offensive signal to potential competitors, which is, I can hurt you if you mess with me. And there's a defensive signal that says, I can protect myself if you try to mess with me. And patents are sort of like ships, sort of little weapons platforms within that concept. So having patents that can be used to actually sue somebody who infringes your patent is the offensive side of patent strategy. And of course, you want to have patents that are defensible, that they'll stand up in court, and that have claims that would read on anybody doing anything like what AtomBeam is doing. And that's always a challenge. And there are a number of the patents that would fit in that category, but when push comes to shove, it'll all depend on who the infringer is and so forth. But that's the offensive side, which is what a lot of people mostly think about when they think about patents. There's another dimension, which is the valuation side. But in terms of using patents, a defensive patent strategy is sort of often thought of as like, if I get sued by a big company or by another, let's say there's another medium-sized growing tech company that's making encryption software, or compaction software, and they sue AtomBeam and say, your technology, your compaction infringes our patents. Well, in that scenario, one of the common replies is, well, sort of a standard litany is, no, I'm not. And even if I am, your patent's not valid. And even if it is, you cheated to get it. Those are the sort of attacking the other guy's patents. And the next one is, well, there's also, and I was doing it before you got your patents, but there's also, in any case, you're infringing my patents too, counter battery. So that's defensive patent strategy. But another aspect, I see it more broadly, is there are other people playing in this kind of space. And if you actually go out and you look at what they're doing, and you file patent applications that sound a lot like what they're doing, but are based on AtomBeam's technology, they may end up being little landmines planted around their core territory. And not that I don't really see patents as like territorial, because there's no fixed space in which they exist. But, so surrounding a potential competitor with patents that look and smell a lot like what they're doing, but are based on compaction, is a way of increasing your strength vis-a-vis them, the perceived strength. So that's also a defensive patent strategy. And one of the ways we've been doing that with AtomBeam is as we get each allowed case, we sort of do a look around in the virtual IP space and say, what's nearby to this island of patentability that I just obtained, or that AtomBeam, just obtained. We just showed that this is patentable. And now I have to think, well, what is there nearby that we can extend that island of patentability to create a credible deterrent against competitors, whether they're single purpose competitors or whether they're, broad, large stack players who may want to try to muscle AtomBeam out of the data compression space. And so that's also it's sort of a hybrid offensive defensive patent strategy, but it's essentially not looking for that ultimate fight in court, because ideally my wish is that none of my clients ever get involved in patent litigation, but mostly because they have such good patent portfolios, nobody wants to mess with them. They just want to buy them. That's the strategy. It's both offensive and defensive, and it involves looking around and trying to not only capture exactly what has been invented, but also think of use cases and additional elements that sort of remove potential threats by other people. You want to go on to the next one there, Charles? This is an example from a service I don't use anymore, but so Tech Insights did this on a platform called Derwent Themescape, and I won't go into why I don't use it anymore, but this is a good example of what's called a landscape map. And you can see the dots represent patents or published patent applications. And so you can sort of see Uber's IP footprint. And so you can see, obviously, they're busy on autonomous. Now, why is LiDAR up there on the top? Well, that's because they want to avoid collisions. They want safe drivers, so they get patents around LiDAR, and they encourage I don't know whether they actually provide equipment with that or not. And security is a little island there, or a mountain peak, but a lot of it involves transport and guided route that's obviously very important. We've all used Uber. So you can see where they're focusing, and this kind of, I do it differently, but this kind of landscape analysis helps you understand what competitors are doing. And this is an example of the kind of mapping I was just talking about, where you can say, for instance, network, you can look at Uber's network patents, and you can say, let's see if we can get some of our technology to show up on that map, so that Uber, when they're doing a landscape, they'll say, well, who is this company called AtomBeam? Looks like they're all around our network stuff, and maybe we can get more bandwidth through our network and be more efficient in providing our ride services, so that we have drivers who are in low connectivity areas, they're still going to have a great experience, and the passengers. So this kind of landscape analysis is great for getting new ideas. It's also great for sizing up threats and understanding competitors and or potential partners. Because if I look at this as an investor, which I am, by the way, in AtomBeam, I'm small, but I believe in the company. If I look at this as an investor, I think, well, okay, Uber's got a lot going on with networking, and I know enough just generally to know that they're all about people in cars all over the place. So connectivity is going to be an issue, bandwidth is going to be an issue. Are you talking to Uber? And if I know somebody, I'll connect you to Ubers and so forth. So it's a way to identify opportunities as well. Any questions on that, on sort of offensive, defensive, and mapping and so forth?
No questions.
And if I'm talking too fast, I tend to get a little intense. Just let me know. Okay, why don't you go on to the next one there, Charles? Okay, this is a carry on.
Okay. No, this is the new one I added. Just
okay. Well, so I've sort of been talking about the AtomBeam patent strategy.
Right.
There's a thumb rule I use for clients that are, if a client makes it clear they want to get one patent filed, and then they want to stop because they just want to be able to go to an investor and say, I have a patent filed, fine. But when I have a client that's got a vision, has a product vision that if they execute, it will be huge. So it's a platform play. Then very quickly, I won't go into how we manage to minimize the costs and so forth, but the point is we do take that into account. But the idea is file early, file often. You want to get out there and get some filings that are about the core technology and about elements to make it practical for the technology to be deployed, and about use cases, specific use cases. An example of that would be system on a chip. Another example could be high frequency trading. There's all kinds of possibilities. When you're doing something as fundamental as data compression, there's like an infinite number. The challenge is picking the ones that have the shortest distance to commercial viability. Internet of Things was an obvious first choice. So you start with core technology patents, and also you build on, you don't sort of do a whole bunch of standalone patents, but you have them sort of connected. And then you build additional features like rotating code books is an example of a way to make it more robust, or detecting man-in-the-middle attacks and detecting compromised code books. Those are things where you're enhancing the platform with features, and then use cases such as, an Uber use case, a patent on, I won't confirm or deny whether there is such a thing, but a patent on deploying a technology like this in a ride-sharing kind of environment. So the strategy is to get big, fast, and cheaply, and to have it cover the core technology as well as some additional things. So, for instance, security and both in terms of detecting a breach as well as preventing a breach, and then use cases, so that it makes the attractiveness of AtomBeam, the company, much higher for people like Inmarsat and Google and Apple and the Navy and so forth. Yeah, I'm not talking about the Air Force, of course, because I'm a Navy guy, but another great potential customer, obviously. And so that's the strategy, is to do it that way. And we continue to execute on that strategy as feasible. Any questions on the patent strategy?
No questions.
Okay.
So, Khalil, do you have questions generally, or?
Yeah,
is-
there's another question here for Charles. If Insar Matt finds a client for AtomBeam, how long will it take to deploy the technology and generate revenue?
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So Inmarsat is, just to be clear, there's a connection, the connection here. Inmarsat provides obviously the satellite communications, but they, in most cases, aren't selling directly to the customer. They're usually going through distributors. The distributors are the ones that actually deal with the customers, except the really big enterprise guys. But a customer of a distributor might have, say, 1,000 somethings somewhere where they're out in the woods and they can't use cellular. So what Inmarsat is doing now is they said, okay, AtomBeam's a partner, compaction is an important technology, and announced that, and now they've moved to talking and ramping up the distributors to talk to us. And so what we're doing is we're having multiple meetings a week with their distributors. The distributors are now working on setting up, in whatever format they use for demos, our technology, so that they're able to say, look, Mr. Customer, if you use straight up no AtomBeam tech compaction, it'll cost you $65,000 a month. But if you use compaction, it will only cost you $22,000 a month, or something along those lines. But to get that all squared away and put it in their system and make it work, and they have different systems that they use for demos and so forth. That's what we're doing now. I think we should, some of them are close to being ready to roll, to start rolling this out to their customers. And so I think those customers will start seeing it here, I hope by the end of the month, to start seeing these demos and signing up. Once a customer has said, yes, I'll use it, then it's just a question of saying, okay, load it in the satellite terminal and give it to the guy, or take the satellite terminal the guy has and load it in. In other words, that part, the execution part, isn't the issue. It's getting everything primed so that it's ready to go. That's the thing that they're doing now. Once that's set, then I think all these guys feel strongly it's going to be a big seller. And they think that they can expand their market significantly, because they can go to a lot of the guys a lot of the prospective customers, especially, to whom they were not able to close the deal. Now they think they can, because, okay, the guy said it was too pricey. I can't spend $65,000 a month. 22, yeah, I could do that. So that's their emphasis. And I think they'll start, the distributors, and by the way, they don't just sell Inmarsat satellite service. They also sell Iridium and this and that, all the other ones also. And they're going to say, and they've said to Inmarsat, and Inmarsat's agreed, Inmarsat isn't the only fish in the sea, and there's going to be occasions in which somebody else would make more sense. And so they're good with that, and that's all part of the plan. But it all comes down to getting it into their standard demos and then showing it to their prospects and customers.
Awesome. And this is a follow-up from that question about theft that we stated earlier. It is normal for software companies to have a backdoor to their own software so they can get into a hacked system. I would suggest coming up with a way of hacking into their hack, maybe a requirement for a secure update from AtomBeam for their system, or to continue working, like a subscription expiration type of thing.
We do have subscription expiration built in, and we're building in a pretty sophisticated licensing system now, that is up and running, but I think they're doing testing now because otherwise all you can do is say turn it on, and okay, you have 3 months to run, and then you turn it off. It's got to be more sophisticated. How many units, how much data, all the things that you bill on. And so all those things are in this licensing system that's now in about to be deployed in the context of these these distributors, as well as anybody else.
And then how much work is required for you to monitor potential patent violations by other companies? Having filed a patent as an employee of a former telecom equipment manufacturer, I know that the work doesn't end once the patent is filled and approved.
So I'll go ahead and tackle that one. I mean, having been at it, so Genesis was acquired by Alcatel, so I'm pretty familiar with the telecom equipment manufacturer world. And it's different with a company that's gotten to that stage of maturity, because then you actually have knockoffs. And so you have to, especially if you're looking at knockoffs coming from, say, China or whatever, looking for maybe Huawei or ZTE infringing some patents. You have a whole sort of surveillance process going on that's quite sophisticated. When you have clients like AtomBeam, my typical smaller tech clients, mostly software companies, that activity isn't really front and center yet. The focus is on getting a product to market and getting to profitability and so forth. And people don't usually start copying a technology until it's achieved market presence and some degree of success. And then people say, well, I'm going to muscle in on that. Samsung copied the iPhone because the iPhone just sort of killed the whole mobile phone market. And Samsung said, actually, literally, the CEO said, I don't care about patents. I want an iPhone equivalent as soon as possible. And they just dealt with the infringement lawsuits afterwards. Well, we're not at that stage yet with a company like AtomBeam. So we're not, I mean, typically when you're a smaller tech company, what might happen is you might have a competitive sales situation where somebody is saying stuff that sounds a lot like what we're saying. And then somebody says, gee, this sounds a lot like what we're saying. And then I might get an email saying, hey, can you check out this company to see if they're doing the kind of thing we're doing? But in terms of a structured ongoing surveillance program, it's not typical. None of my clients are actively doing it because it's not cost effective. It's difficult to do because the analysis that goes into, is this serviced by somebody else, which maybe is generating 20,000 in revenue themselves? Is it actually infringing this patent? That's a very detailed legal analysis. And then if they are, it costs you more than $20,000 to figure that out. And, so it's not really something that gets done with companies at this stage in their life cycle. But if, for instance, if AtomBeam's compaction gets built into a number of key industries via Inmarsat and military and this, that, and the other thing, it starts to become a de facto standard. Then you start paying attention to the big stack players. Are they touting similar features, et cetera, et cetera. But that's around this time that also a company, as it grows, starts to have a competitive marketing, a subset of the marketing department, which is competitive intelligence. So it would be early days for that here at AtomBeam and similarly situated companies, but it eventually becomes something that becomes relevant.
Sorry, I want to add one more quick thing there. So one of our larger investors is very friendly with a patent litigator, and he has a small firm, but he has successfully won patent litigation against Google a couple of times and against another big company, I can't remember. At any rate, what he does is he takes this sort of thing. If he thinks there's a good case, he thinks that he'll take it on contingency. He'll take it on getting a share of whatever the award is, and he's formidable, and he's very, very strong on our patent portfolio. He thinks very good and getting better all the time. It turned out we had a occasion in which we believed that we needed to go to war. And yeah, as Brian's saying, we're not sitting here and it's hard for us to do it. Is Huawei using it to send data from this to that? I mean, how the heck do I know? But if we find something and we think that is starting to occur, and we're at the stage we're at, one of the arguments will be, well, they can just stomp on you. You're a little company. What can you do? Well, we can do something. And some of our documents have been tailored by the same patent litigator with that in mind. So the point is that we may be small, but we're still mighty in prospect.
Then we have another question here. On the codebook, just want to highly recommend a multi-layer unique way to protect the codebook or codebooks themselves. My recommendation is to protect the codebook or codebooks in such a way to substantially protect the codebooks. So a lot of the word codebooks in there.
Yeah. So Brian, you know Josh's recommendation about encrypting codebooks. Do you know that one?
You're on mute, Brian.
Yes, but I don't have the details in.
I don't either, but you might be able to say it better than I could. So,
well, I mean, the idea is you can encrypt the codebooks while you're transferring them from point A to point B, and then you can even keep them encrypted and then only sort of unencrypt them with random access at the time at runtime. So there is
RAM.
What's that?
Into RAM. That is to say, you put it in RAM while you're using it, and it's
right. Yeah, you're breaking
not,
up.
Then
you're
it goes away when you. Oh, am I? Okay. I don't know what I can do. I don't know what I can do.
You sound good now. You sound
okay.
good.
Probably just the interruption in the code. All I was saying was that you can encrypt the code book while it's stored and the thing is not being used, and then you can activate it and put it in RAM. And when it's in RAM, then apparently it's extremely difficult to parse while it's sitting in RAM and it's all just ones and zeros, right? So at any rate, so that's been one recommendation that we've heard. Another is like to emphasize, okay, I'm sitting in my F-35 flying along, and I have 20 code books here, and somebody uses a big computer a long time and hacks into it, and now he knows what my right aileron is doing. I mean, in other words, it doesn't tell him anything about what his left aileron is doing. And it doesn't help him sort of decode another code book for anything. And it doesn't give him all the information about that aircraft. So I'm just sort of saying that it's deep compartmentalization, along with, yes, there are techniques that we thought of to encrypt the code book when and only use it in RAM decrypted. So I hope that addresses the question. But yeah, we do take very seriously, and I can tell you that the military takes very seriously the security of code books. They're like a encryption key. You don't hand it out.
You have teased about how cheaply you have been able to get the IP to where it is now. Can you provide the actual budget?
Brian, you could probably say better than I. Rough numbers. Just don't have it in front of me.
Well, I don't either. I mean, maybe it's easier just to say that normally patents or patent legal work is done hourly, and my firm has done fixed price for everybody. That's how we do it, and our fixed prices are low. and also it's been a combination of cash and equity, so that essentially the loaded cost per patent that AtomBeam has been paying is probably, cash cost per patent is probably 5K or something, which is really, really low.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of bang for not a lot of buck.
Yeah, I mean, we probably have spent, including, what we effectively pay in shares, something like maybe 200, maybe 250,000. And I will tell you that a prior company I was with, we used Morrison, and we spent over 2 million and got 2 patents. And it's true, there was a lot of like office actions and stuff, but it's also, I mean, just out of the box, every firm that you want to talk to, the big firms, is going to start with 12K just to file one. And then you're talking office actions and, and all the other stuff. So, including patent fees, I would guess 250 is a reasonable
Spread over several years.
Yes. And that's incredibly economical.
Awesome. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. Charles, as we start to wrap here, are there any final remarks you'd like to point out today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I hope everyone takes away here is, well, two basic categories. One is what's spurring us to think about, or to actually be in the process of terminating this raise. And it's really our view that we're coming up on a crossroads. It's a combination of a lot of interest from a lot of companies. I mean, I'm going to this conference. Here's an example. And who's reaching out to me? There's big companies reaching out to me and asking to meet. So we're getting some sort of presence, some traction. And near term, there's these distributors, but there's also several other things that are going on that I can't say, yes, it's here in hand, here's my contract or something, but I'm feeling confident enough that I can say, yeah, I think we're going to be fine. I don't think we need to keep raising this money. Second piece of that really is to say, what are we really going to take to get it into chips to really make this ramp? Well, that's going to be serious institutional money. One of those, and I guess there's a third leg to this, because to the extent that we were successful, and I'm not saying we will be, but if we were successful in nailing a phase 2, $1.2 million phase 2 from the Air Force, that changes our valuation, as would probably nailing a few commercial accounts, as would some other things. And so I see this as a turning point. This is, we're coming to a point, and I can see it down the road, and that's why we're doing that. The other thing is just in terms of like our whole patent portfolio, that's a freaking formidable portfolio. You're talking 26 issued and allowed patents. I mean, name another company that's like our size that can do something like that. Is, it's you're gonna have a hard time, is what I'm saying. Look around on StartEngine, see how many guys have any patents, who have something patentable. I mean, okay, they're not making pies or beer or something, but name another one that has anything like that. And it's hard to express and make everybody understand how big a deal that is. So, anything else from you, Brian, before we go?
No, I think I agree with what you said, and I think you're in a very strong position. So happy to sort of pitch in and answer questions, and they're good questions. Thank you.
And we're grateful to you, Brian, for all your help and for your participation. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone who attended today. And be on the lookout for that webinar recap. We'll be posting it on the StartEngine page. Hope everyone
Yep.
has
If anybody has a question, put it on the site. Take care.
a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.